Welcome to the wonderful world of Jane Austen. In this episode, we are going to learn a little bit more about education and accomplishments in Jane Austen's time. To understand better how education was treated in Jane Austen's time, we should first understand how society worked, economically speaking, and what the roles of men and women were. Since the Glorious Revolution in 1688, the dominant order in England was based on agrarian landed property. These properties were developed by capitalist practices, such as investments and improvements in the land. In the upper classes and the gentry, the first son would inherit his father's property, the second may inherit his mother's property, if she had any, and being so, they would be part of the landed gentry. The other sons, though, would have to join the army, the navy, the clergy, or to become a lawyer. Gentlemen could also become surgeons and physicians. Apothecaries and attorneys were lower class. Sometimes they could also be a banker or a rich merchant.
You dropped something! Don't pick it up! And then you're introduced!
Women had no profession in Jane Austen's time, but they had also an important role in society. They were necessary in the transmission of property in three ways: biological reproduction, capital investment, and social culture. Biological reproduction, because education would deter a woman from producing an illegitimate heir. Capital investment, because women bring capital or property to marriage. Austen's heroines usually don't bring cash or property. They bring more of the intellectual, moral, and cultural capital acquired by education. Social culture, because it was also necessary that women should know how to behave in society, not using money recklessly, nor taking part in improper entertainments or in illicit love affairs. They should be moral and able to supervise the education of their children. Men and women started their education at an early age, learning literacy and numeracy. They were usually taught at home by a governess or a tutor. After that, the education was different for boys and girls. Boys would usually go to a preparatory school from 8 to 13 years, and then they would go for 5 years to a public school and sometimes continue their studies at an university, in case they did not join the Navy or the Army. They were offered knowledge of Greek and Latin, history, geography, science, mathematics, and theology. Women education was mainly divided in 4 areas: schooling, household management, religious instruction, and accomplishments. All these areas were taught either by a governess, who lived in the family for a small salary, bed and board, or a tutor, who visited the family and were paid per lesson, or attendance in a day or boarding school. Schooling consisted on the early phase of learning literacy and numeracy. Household management was the ability of participating or simply supervising food preparation, washing, needlework, and care of the sick, young, and the aged. Religious instruction consisted of participation in the family's church.
Justice.
Well, I think it's amazing you young ladies have the patience to be so accomplished.
What do you mean, Charles?
You all paint tables and play the piano and embroider cushions. I never heard of a young lady, but people say she is accomplished.
The word is indeed applied too liberally. I cannot boast of knowing more than half a dozen women in all my acquaintance that are truly accomplished.
Nor I, to be sure.
Goodness, you must comprehend a great deal in the idea.
I do.
Absolutely. She must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word. And something in her air and manner of walking.
And of course she must improve her mind by extensive reading.
I'm no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I rather want to know at your knowing any.
Are you so severe on your own sex?
I never saw such a woman. She would certainly be a fearsome thing to behold.
Accomplishments would include the knowledge of dancing, singing, and playing music, which were important to display the women's body, but also the knowledge of drawing, painting, modern language, usually French and Italian, decorative needlework, and the knowledge of the better sort of reading, such as essays, drama, poetry, and travelogues, and also books of the day. It means contemporary publications. Accomplishments would demonstrate taste and cultural distinction. And accomplished women would also know the social arts of conversation and letter writing.
How does Georgiana get along, Darcy?
She plays very well.
I hope she practices. No excellence can be acquired without constant practice. I've told Mrs. Collins this. Though you have no instrument of your own, you're very welcome to come to Rosings and play on the pianoforte in the housekeeper's room.
Oh, thank you, Your
You'll be in nobody's way in that part of the house.
You mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy, by coming in all your state to hear me? But I won't be alarmed, even if your sister does play so well.
I am well enough acquainted with you, Miss Elizabeth, to know that I cannot alarm you, even should I wish it.
If a woman was not accomplished, she could be either merely notable, a woman who knew little more than domestic economy, or learned and blues-talking, a woman who had knowledge of male education, which was unfit for a woman. Mary Wollstonecraft is an example of a learned woman, and in her work, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, she criticizes the education of women through accomplishments. One of her arguments was that men could never know if women were not really capable of learning the subjects they did, because women were never given a chance. Besides that, she argued that women could be more useful to society if men stopped to treat them as weak and incapable. Society would have much to gain and little to lose with the improvement of 50% of the population's mind. Another of her arguments was that of women being denied the use of God-given reason, which would consequently bar them from spiritual salvation. Jane Austen once wrote to her niece Fanny Knight that pictures of perfections make me sick and wicked. Therefore, she did not create heroines that were perfectly educated. She wanted to illustrate her belief that good or bad education guarantees nothing, and that either a poorly or a perfectly educated young woman are apt to make mistakes. Elizabeth Bennet, Emma Woodhouse, and both of the Dashwood sisters are examples of well-educated heroines that made mistakes by judging people wrongly. Unlike to her contemporaries, Austen also did not usually talk about fallen women and did not emphasize the ruin of ones who made great mistakes. She mentions fallen women in Sense and Sensibility, Colonel Brandon's first beloved, and her daughter born out of wedlock, who is also pregnant and unmarried, and also in Mansfield Park, through the elopement of Maria Rushworth, a married woman, with another man. But the theme is not usually highlighted in her novels. By creating characters that are prone to make mistakes, regardless of their good or bad education, Jane Austen is also trying to educate her own readers and alert them about the dangers of real world. All these ideas about women education were supported by some male and female writers. The most famous is probably Rousseau, who in his work Emile, or On Education, describes women as being made especially to please men. Women should be passive and weak and put up little resistance. Dr. John Gregory was also an important moralist who wrote books about how women should behave. In his A Father's Legacy to His Daughters, he wrote that women should be cautious in displaying their good sense. In case women happen to have any learning, it should be kept a secret, because men generally look with a jealous eye on a woman of cultivated understanding. It is thanks to women like Mary Wollstonecraft, who defied the social order at her time, that women can now go to universities and be independent from men's power.
My eldest sister is currently in London. Perhaps you happen to see her there.
I haven't been fortunate enough,
You
no.
play the pianoforte, Miss Bennet?
A little, ma'am, and very poorly.
Oh. You draw?
No, not at all.
Your sisters, do they draw?
Not one.
It's very strange. I suppose you had no opportunity. Your mother should have taken you to town every spring for the benefit of the masters.
I'm sure my mother wouldn't have minded, but my father hates town.
Has your governess left you?
We never had a governess.
No governess? 5 daughters brought up at home without a governess. I never heard such a thing. Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education.
Not at all, Lady Catherine.